Welcome to this IUN garden session, Engaging Youth in the Garden. The presenter for this session is Rebecca Koetz. Rebecca is the urban agriculture educator in Lake County. She focuses on food systems work, food justice, beginning farmers, urban agriculture, sustainable agriculture, youth natural resources and gardening, community gardens, and master gardeners. Rebecca, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You should be looking at my slides. We're going to be talking about engaging youth in the garden, and then I also added farm and nature just because that lets me kind of broaden it a little bit, and there's a lot of overlap in there. And here's my contact information and a photo from a few years ago now of some kids painting a compost bin that they built using recycled pallets at a sort of small local children's museum called Imagination Station in Lafayette, Indiana. And that was part of an Engaged Nature nonprofit group that taught kids about nature and gardening. So we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of gardening. Probably we're all on the same page, but some information maybe that you can use to help promote yourself and your garden initiatives to try to kind of talk other people into getting on your boat and be enthusiastic about gardening. We're going to show some example youth gardening resources, some funding opportunities, and example curricula that you're welcome to use and borrow for your own programs. So some health benefits, nutrition. So community gardens provide access to fresh foods, address food deserts, food apartheid, just empowers the community to be able to grow what they want and food that is culturally relevant. Community gardeners and their children eat healthier than non-gardening families. Kids are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables when they grow it themselves, and they have that vested interest. They got their hands dirty. They're more likely to prefer fruits and veggies, and they have preferred attitudes towards fruits and veggies. Being in natural spaces through gardening or other activities fosters recovery from mental fatigue. It's good for your mind and your emotional health, as well as your physical health, improves your ability to recover from illness and injury, really boosts your immune system, restores concentration, and helps you recover from stress and improve productivity. Also, gardening just helps people get more active throughout their whole life. So, youth to seniors, gardening is a great activity that can be as intense or low intensity as the gardener desires. It keeps people active for longer and provides fitness opportunities related to walking, lifting, carrying, digging, planting, raking, and practicing balance and dexterity, improves range of motion, hand-eye coordination, and motor skills. So lots of benefits. Some curriculum topics that can tie into the classroom might be talking about plant life cycles and structure, soil structure and function, plant adaptation, weather, ecosystems, sustainability, experimental design, and gardening has been shown to improve science scores. So all the more reason to get gardening with youth. Now we're getting into some example resources. So these are all through the Junior Master Gardener curricula, which is a nationwide initiative that I think was started through Texas A&M, so the land-grant university in Texas, but we have Junior Master Gardener programs throughout the whole US through different institutions, the land-grant universities that offer extension services. And you see here, let's see if I can pull up my pointer. Love this. So this is kind of the classic Junior Master Gardener resources, the teacher leader guide. So this is what the teacher would use, whether you're in a classroom or you're, homeschooling, working with scouts, or just want to have some activity examples to use with your kids outside. And then there is a youth handbook that accompanies that. So these are kind of the classic ones. And all of these resources can be found at jmgkids.us. and you can purchase the books, you can go through trainings. A lot of times the local extension services will offer online and in-person trainings, or the jmgkids.us also offers trainings. And there are some activity examples at their YouTube page, so you can check that out. And some other examples of curriculum, they have wildlife gardeners. So for people that are really interested in creating wildlife habitat or pollinator gardens, that would be a good one for you. And literature in the garden. I really like this, especially for working with younger kids, but it works for older kids too. And then especially for like library programs, this would be a great tool. So literature in the garden can come as a standalone book, or it comes with a collection of books that you can read and have some sort of gardening message or tie-in. And then the literature in the garden book comes with activities around those books. There's also some older youth, like level 2 books. So these are more for middle school, and they're kind of in the format of like a forensics investigation. So you're talking about like water usage, plant pests and diseases, and weeds and things like that. Most of the Junior Master Gardener curricula are suited for younger youth in elementary school, kind of like grades 3 through 5, but the activities are fun for all ages. And Learn, Grow, Eat, Go is the most recent curriculum guide, and it factors in a lot of the classic Junior Master Gardener, but also a nutrition and physical fitness component. Some other resources would be this kidsgardening.org, has a variety of curriculum available, littlegreenthumbs.org, and these two also provide funding. So we'll list them again. So they have some grants available. And I know there's at least some teachers using Little Green Thumbs in Southern Indiana that I've come across. I don't have as much experience with kids gardening. And then 4-H through Purdue Extension has some curriculum resources available. I don't believe you have to be in 4-H to get the activity guides, but they have 4 different levels ranging from like early elementary school all the way to high school. And it goes from, planting your seeds, beginning in the garden, talking about soil health and things like that, all the way up to actually selling your produce and having like a farm stand. So you can see the titles here, See Them Sprout, Let's Get Growing, Take Your Pick, and Growing Profits. So all the stages. And this can be found at edustore.purdue.edu. So if you looked up if you went to that site and you looked up gardening, this might come up. And then there's also a National Ag in the Classroom, which you'll be getting a resource page later that has some resources that I used for a teacher training at this through this organization. So agclassroom.org. So things that could be related to vegetable farming or gardening. And then also the Indiana Farm Bureau has some ag education resources available. So in farmbureau.org/INFBA or INFB Ag Ed. So there's one for you. It'll be in the resource sheet. And then there's also a USDA Garden Detective Adventure resource that I have listed here. So if you looked up like USDA Garden Education, this would come up, and it's kind of in that like forensics mindset with different activities. Getting into more of the nature side of things, this John Hopkins resource does have a food waste and food systems focused curriculum that's more for older youth, like junior high, high school, foodspan.org. There's also the Nature of Teaching, which is near and dear to my heart because I served as the program leader for that. That's through Purdue Extension. It's purdue.edu/nature with standards-based lesson plans, mostly for grades 3 through 5, but some high school and middle school as well, related to anything natural resources. There's a wildlife page that talks about wildlife habitat, creating habitat, talking about forestry, fisheries, forensics, and then there's also a health and wellness. So like mindful practices in the garden and outside. And then there's a food waste page that talks about food waste and natural resources, how food waste affects the environment, how our food system affects the environment, things like that. There's also this greatlakes.org that has resources and curriculum for nature. And then a lot of people might be familiar with the Project Wild, Project Wet, Flying Wild, and then I forgot to include it, but Project Learning Tree is also in that. Here it is. We have projectlearningtree.org, but it's under this Project Wet resource that'll be on your resource page that gets sent out. But Project Wild has lesson plans and activities that teachers can use around wildlife and natural resources. Project Wet is specifically with water, and then Project Learning Tree is with trees. And then Flying Wild, which I actually have a copy here to show. This is kind of a special one in the series. It's along the same, it's in the same vein as Project Wild, but it focuses on birds. And the activity book is actually, you can use it to create a bird festival. So if you're really into birds, it's a great kind of like gateway into nature and observing and creating wildlife habitat, because birds are so easy for youth and people to see and interact with and be able to, listen to calls, identify by calls or by silhouette, talk about, different bird mouth types and what they eat. There are some that are, carnivores, omnivores, herbivores. So birds are just a great application of a lot of different topics. And then there's also this Everglades of the North resource here. Another resource that I just wanted to highlight was the Indiana Grown for Schools, which is all about connecting schools with local farms or helping schools to talk about gardening in the classroom or get a school garden started. So ingrownforschools.com with the number 4 is how to get to that. And then if you look at their toolkit page, they have a lot of great toolkits for schools to use. One is for procurement. So it's for their school provider that handles procuring the school lunches. Then they'd be able to connect with a list of different farmers that are local to them that have opted into this Indiana Grown for Schools, that have worked with schools before to maybe get some of their school lunches sourced from local farmers. There's also an farm to early care and education toolkit. So talking about farming and gardening with younger kids. There's an ag and nutrition education toolkit. And then recently they came out with, and I got to help serve on the committee to create this school gardens toolkit. So it's all the like tips and tricks and strategies and steps to creating a school garden. Highly recommend. Getting into funding resources, you can get some funding for your school garden or youth garden through littlegreenthumbs.org. So this talks about Little Green Sprouts, which is for like a shorter time frame, kindergarten to grade 3. Little Green Thumbs is for a larger garden for a longer time frame, grades 3 through 6. And there's a national grant application windows. Your awards could be in the form of garden equipment, virtual support for your school garden by experts, and access to a teacher portal with different curriculum resources. There's also the Lake County Master Gardeners, who have a grant program every year in the early spring. So the window is past now. It's usually the deadline is sometime in March, and it comes out like in January. So if you go to the Lake County mastergardeners.org website, if you're in Lake County, you can apply for a grant up to $600 for community or educational gardening projects. And then the National Ag in the Classroom provides $500 grants for pre-K through 12th grade teachers for things like schoolyard gardens, embryology, so hatching chicken eggs, aquaculture, agricultural literacy, reading programs, and the grants are available mid-July to September, and they're for 1-year programs. So if you go to agclassroom.org/teachers/grants, you'll find that resource, and that should be in your resource sheet. You can also sometimes get some small donations of materials from a local store, a local landscape nursery, or a big box store like Home Depot. Just go in and talk to their customer service, see if they have anything. I know that we've gotten resources from Home Depot before, but not to promote Home Depot specifically. I know that people have had similar luck with Lowe's or Menards. Kidsgardening.org has some grant opportunities for various initiatives. Growing Spaces has different grants. And then Seed Your Future has different grants. Now we're getting into some example curricula that you're welcome to steal. You're welcome to use and apply on your own. So this is kind of an example of school curricula. If you have like a 4-part or maybe like 4 months of gardening that you're doing in the classroom and taking it out to a school garden, or if you don't have a school garden, just, connecting with garden topics in the classroom. And this is utilizing the Junior Master Gardener curriculum, which I have an example of the Learn, Grow, Eat, Go, which is where I get most of my activities from, because it bridges that, plant science and gardening topics with nutrition and fitness. So this is maybe part 1. So maybe you're just getting started. It's early in the spring semester. Maybe it's like February or March, and you're going to get started before planting. So what students should learn before planting? Again, this is more like grades 3 through 5, but could be scaled up for older students. So you might learn what plants need to survive using the Know and Show sombrero, or the Shake, Rattle, and Roll activity to learn about soil. So this is a picture of the Know and Show sombrero, where kids, especially younger kids, might have a lot of fun making these hats out of newspaper and then decorating them with different crafts that you have available to represent what a plant needs to thrive. So they need nutrients, sun, water, soil, air. You kind of see all of that. And this is what the activity would look like in the Learn, Grow, Eat, Go book here. And then the Shake, Rattle, and Roll. A lot of people have used this activity, not even just through Junior Master Gardener, but this is where you can break down your soil into the different textures of, sand, silt, and clay by getting a cup of soil, putting it in a clear jar and with some water and a little bit of dish soap maybe, that will help the layers show up better. Let it sit for a day and then see what happens. So you'll see the sand go to the bottom, and then you'll have a layer of silt, a layer of clay, and you can even bring some math into it and use like rulers or measuring tape to see, how thick the whole thing is and how thick each of the layers are, and do like a percentage. So what percentage of sand, silt, and clay, bring in the soil triangle, see like what your soil would be labeled as. So you could do that with a school garden soil, or have kids bring in their own soil from their backyards in their own jars, and have everybody do it and have pictures of the soil triangle. You can have kids learn plant families if you're doing a vegetable garden. Talk about companion plants, plants that grow well together. There are different activities you can find in the Junior Master Gardener resources. And then once you're in the garden, you can prepare the soil by loosening it with shovels or just gloved hands. If you don't have enough tools for everybody, just have them kind of like wake up the soil once it's not too wet. Then for part 2, maybe you're getting into, late March, early April, you're thinking about planting and planning. So in the classroom, you might start paper towel gardening. So here's a garden planting chart for how many seeds you can glue to 1 square foot paper towel based on how much space each of those seeds need. And that's actually a great way to really get the most plants growing in like a small space. So get the most out of your space. And then also the Home Sweet Home activity helps you assess your site to think about, is your garden site ideal? And you have the kids maybe work in groups and have them assess different areas. Maybe you're trying to think, where do you want your school garden? And so you send different groups to different areas with different teachers or assistants, and they have to make these assessments to see what is the best site to put their garden. You can also have them read the back of seed packets to see what information is there, thinking about when to plant, how far apart to plant the seeds, how deep to plant the seeds, what their grow zones are, thinking about the variety, if there's any sort of disease resistance for more mature kids to start thinking about. And then in the garden, you can plant your paper towels. So once everything's dry and you're ready to plant, if it's a cool season veg, you might be able to do it in April. If it's a warm season veg, you'd be doing it more like in May or June. And so you can actually just put that layer of soil over top your paper towel and just plant it that way. And the paper towel and glue will eventually break down. And you can also look at, when to plant different plants using the Purdue Vegetable Planting Guide publication to see your vegetable calendar. And then part 3, where, in the growing season, you're kind of thinking of maintenance. Maybe you're thinking of weeds and pests and diseases. And the classroom, you might, learn how to identify different insects and insect pests. There's a Don't Bug Me activity and an Ordering Insects publication through Junior Master Gardener. And then in the garden, you can explore insect pests using the insect collection activity. So Suck-a-Bug, you see pictured here, which you can use film canisters if you don't have access to that. Recycled medicine like pill canisters is good. And some tubing, maybe you get like through at a big box store in the fish aquarium center, or and then some sort of like cheesecloth, and then clay to kind of hold everything together. So you just need to be able to create a hole. And so the idea is that you're able to suck the bug up into this canister, but then there's a filter here, so you're not sucking the bug up into you. And so that could be kind of a fun activity, and then a great way to observe smaller insects. Definitely don't do this with larger insects, but for larger insects, you can maybe invest in a set of nets and different, look at the insects under a magnifying glass and really get out there. And then, of course, you're going to maintain the garden by watering and weeding. And then there's a guide to common lawn and garden weeds for more information. Or you can also talk about what is a weed. Maybe some of the weeds are edible. Some of the things that we talk about as weeds, maybe they're pollinators, but we don't want them seeding more. So you can, let them flower, but then, remove them from the garden when they, before they actually go to seed. And then for part 4, harvest. So a good tip for a school garden would be to plan your garden around, when you're going to be there to harvest. So if there's nobody there in the summer, you wouldn't want to plant things that need to be harvested in the summer. So that Indiana Grown for Schools resource talks about planting like a spring garden or a fall garden with things like leafy greens and radishes that may be available before they go to summer break or after they go to summer break, maybe some things like pumpkins. And you can have a fall planting and harvest as well of like your spinach and your radishes. So in the classroom for harvest, you're going to learn what plants are ready to harvest by following this website. There's the Junior Master Gardener Harvest Indicator website. So if you want the kids to get familiar with the computer, or you can print some resources, this talks about like what the plants look like. And you actually see, this is an example, it's like this Kid Zone activity. It shows like a quiz. So you can see like, when is the bell pepper ready to harvest? Which one is ready to harvest? And then they go through that. So that could be kind of a fun, if you need your technology standards to be met. And then there's the garden planting chart that'll give you some ideas for when the plants will be available for harvest. So that goes along with the newspaper or paper towel gardening activity, and reading the back of your seeds will give you an estimate number of days to harvest. And then in the garden, you're going to harvest the produce, talk about how to harvest and when the plant is ready to harvest, bring them indoors, wash them thoroughly, and then do some taste testing. And then there's Food Link for some ideas for recipes. So Purdue Extension Food Link or extension.purdue.edu/foodlink. And then if you want to talk about food waste, you can talk about, you can go to that Purdue Nature of Teaching, purdue.edu/nature for some activities and lessons related to food waste. So that was one example. If you have a garden camp, maybe a little bit more informal. I did this with the Hammond Sportsplex, and we also did like a 4-H Spark Club. So like a quick small club for 4-H on a specific topic. So this would be maybe you just have like a few days, maybe just an hour or two. So day one, we're going to do the planning, the home garden, the garden site assessment, that home sweet home, learn what plants need to survive, the plant family relay race. So there's a lot more like activity maybe in like a camp setting. So instead of just like seeing pictures of different plants and plant families, maybe you do a relay race, which I've done a few times with kids and they seem to really like it, where you maybe have different pictures of plants or seed packets. And then you have like different boxes that represent different plant families, and they have to like go over like an obstacle course or relay to put their plant in the correct box with the plant family. And then maybe you have like 2 teams and they do that. So that's really fun and gets a little energy spent, especially if you're doing this over the summer. And then day 2, we're going to do a fruit and veggie lab where they dissect flowers or dissect fruits and vegetables to see like what are the different parts of a plant, see the seeds and the cellular structure, being able to look under a microscope if possible, and learning the difference between male and female flower parts. So this is like a good visual of that. And lilies are a great example of flowers that have really clear, distinct flower parts to use, like daylilies. Yeah, and then continue day 3. So you might do insect pests and predators. You might go out and look for different insects and use your ordering guides to see what insects are in different orders. Learning how to ID different pest damage, maybe do pest bingo. Yeah, and then learning like what is a pest and what are some beneficial insects, natural ways to prevent pests. And then how do we attract the beneficial insects that will control the food chain? And then day 4, I did like an all about herbs so that they can have something to take home. So some sort of planting in a container like herbs or leafy greens that grow quickly and could do well long-term indoors, or can be planted outside if the kids have an outside garden. And you might bring in examples of herbs for them to taste. You might bring in seed packets for them to learn how to read different potting soil, so different examples of different kinds of potting soil, and use kind of a mindful activity to smell, feel, taste, look at the different herbs or different plants, and have them write in a journal. And a couple of recent youth programs I've done related to these topics. So at Bellaboo's, I work with them a lot. They're like pre-K, little kids, toddlers. I took this lesson, which is actually mostly for like 5th and 6th graders, from the nature of teaching on food waste and natural resources. And I kind of scaled it down to be more hands-on for the little kids. And the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds really seemed to get a kick out of this one, where they created their own farm stand. You know, I had different food cards that are all printable for free from here. And you can have them choose like what they want to farm from these resources. And then you have resource cards, and someone, maybe the teacher, acts as Mother Nature. And so they have to pay Mother Nature their land and resource cards to get their food, to grow that food. And then they get some food money, and they can, you know, trade food with their neighbor farmer, or they can use their money to buy the food. And it comes with food signs. So you see like how much land and water resource cards are needed to produce each of the food items, and also how much money they could be charging. And then I added a couple of extra things that are not included in the lesson plan, but I thought was a really great kind of like whole picture, a big picture look at this. So they could create more land resource cards by using their compost cards. So they're building their soil, building their land, and they can create more water resource cards using water catchment. So this is a picture of a rain barrel. And so they, you know, get more land and water to grow more food, and then they can trade or barter with their farmer neighbors. And then I also recently did a pollinator planting winter sowing workshop with Dolly Foster, who's been on here before, and another master gardener who everybody was really interested in native plants. And this says December. Oh yeah. Okay. So they were collecting milk jugs. This is at Banneker at Marquette Elementary School in Gary. So the teachers they created kind of a competition between the classrooms of which classroom could bring in the most gallon jugs, like recycled milk jugs or water jugs. And then we turned them into the winter sowing for pollinators for the school garden. And then I also recently did this with a school in Lowell earlier this year. And that's all I have for everybody today. Feel free to follow Purdue Extension at Facebook or on our website. And here's my contact information as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions from the group. Rebecca, I'd like to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. People are welcome to follow up later.